The black armored Audi A8L moved on Maplewood Drive at a speed accurate to the mile, as if it were controlled by a military navigation system inside Admiral Patricia Walker was oblivious to the absolute quiet the car provided. That silence was not luxury, but a security requirement, a necessary layer of insulation between her and the chaotic world outside. Outside, the morning sun of the Seattle metro area shone brightly, but to Walker it was just a monotonous gray. She was en route to an emergency meeting at the Pentagon, a meeting where she, as chair of the Navy's Disciplinary and Standards Committee, had to present a report on the complete overhaul of procurement systems and rules of engagement at foreign bases. The importance of the documents in the leather briefcase on the passenger seat could change the fate of thousands of sailors. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights appeared from behind, disrupting the perfect balance in the cabin. Walker did not flinch. A career-flying FA-18. Hornets in commanding strike groups had taught her that flinching was a luxury. She merely glanced at the dashboard clock, 8:00 a.m. She had 15 minutes to reach the naval base Bremerton before transferring to a secure military vehicle. She pulled the car over a maneuver that was perfectly smooth and law-abiding. The door of the black and white patrol car opened, and Officer James Carter stepped out. Carter, with badge 66221 gleaming on his chest and aviator sunglasses, did not walk. He strode a heavy, deliberate display of authority. His right hand rested lightly on his side arm, an unnecessary gesture for a routine traffic stop, but a clear statement he was in control. Carter's eyes scanned from the armored Audi A8 through the tinted window to the silhouette of the woman of color inside the car. With its exorbitant value and subtle details usually seen only on diplomatic or CEO models, it instantly triggered a false suspicion in Carter's mind. He approached the window and knocked sharply. Walker slowly lowered the window just enough to communicate. The smell of cheap cologne and sweat flooded the cabin, shattering the sterile atmosphere inside. "License and registration?" Carter growled with no polite greeting. Walker, with dark brown skin, deep black eyes, and her hair cut short and neat according to military regulations, looked directly at him. "Officer, I am en route to a critical mission. What is the reason for this stop?" Her composure made Carter frown. He was used to fear, stuttering, or defiance. This absolute self-possession was a challenge. "Critical mission." Carter laughed a dry, grating sound. He bent down low, his eyes hidden behind the sunglasses, staring at her with unconcealed contempt. "Listen, lady, a woman like you driving this expensive car in this area right next to a major military base is illegal. I suspect organized criminal activity. Get out of the car now!" It was racial contempt. Blunt and undisguised, it was an abuse of power. From the first second to James Carter, the car was the evidence, and Patricia Walker's skin was the conviction. In that moment, Admiral Patricia Walker felt no anger. She felt a cold calm set in. This calm was not instinct, but the result of 30 years of training. She was the first woman in Navy history to fly the FA-18 fighter jet. She had survived 75-hour interrogations in the SIU Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape program, and she had navigated hundreds of political crises at the Pacific Command. Her heart rate remained at 55 beats per minute. She was not a panicked victim. She was a commanding officer in the process of a tactical situation assessment. She recalled her first rule in the intelligence room: let your enemy believe you are harmless. Carter had no idea who he was dealing with. He thought he was catching a big fish for a promotion. He did not know he had just challenged the entire defense system of the United States. Walker's steel-wrapped-in-silk demeanor kicked in. She decided to comply to let Carter violate every remaining procedure. "Understood," Walker replied, her voice low and clear. I will retrieve my documents. She reached her hand slowly towards the specially designed military satchel on the passenger seat. That was Carter's violation way under traffic law. A driver has the right to retrieve their identification and registration, but to Carter, that slow gesture was an insult. He immediately tensed his hand, tightening on his weapon. "Do not move!" Carter roared, his voice cracking with tension and surprise. "I said, do not move! Keep your hands where they are. You are now suspected of drug or weapons possession. What are you trying to conceal?" Walker stopped, her fingers just inches from the satchel. Inside the satchel was her top-secret, CIA-sensitive compartmented information clearance card, her military ID proving her identity and rank. Carter had prevented her from verifying her identity. The conflict was established. Walker was attempting to de-escalate by complying with the law. Carter was intentionally escalating because of prejudice. Officer Patricia Walker said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I was simply trying to retrieve my identification as you requested." Carter did not listen. He turned, grabbing his radio dispatch. "This is Unit 6621. Request immediate backup. At Maplewood Drive and 4th Street, situation escalating. Suspected organized crime. Request 2 units emergency assistance." Time moved slowly. At 8:16 a.m., after dispatch had already confirmed that the vehicle was clean, Carter requested backup anyway without ever asking her name. And we waited. At 8:18 a.m., a second patrol car arrived, screeching to a halt with flashing lights. Officer Ethan Brooks stepped out of the second car. Brooks was a younger officer with worried eyes and an alert but not aggressive demeanor like Carter. Walker observed Brooks. She knew Brooks was the key. He was the intermediary, an officer caught in his colleague's error. Ethan Brooks approached, looked at the armored Audi, then at James Carter, then at Patricia Walker. He felt an inexplicable tension in the air. Walker saw the opportunity. She looked directly into Brooks' eyes through the window, just enough for Brooks to feel that absolute focus. Her eyes were not pleading. They were assessing. She was planting a seed of doubt. Officer Patricia Walker's voice was low and clear, ensuring that both patrol car dash cams were recording every word. "I am on my way to an emergency Department of Defense meeting at the Naval Base Bremerton. Your colleagues' actions are without legal basis, and you are violating my constitutionally protected freedom of movement. Do you wish to verify my ID now?" The direct authoritative reference to the Constitution and the Department of Defense made Brooks freeze. He glanced at Carter, who was breathing heavily with fury. "Officer Brooks! He has no right to challenge me!" Carter roared. "Get back to your car and help with crowd control." But it was too late. Walker had made her statement. She did not need to shout. She had said enough for the system to take notice. Her authority was not a siren. It was cold truth wrapped in legal terms. Carter, completely losing control, turned back to Walker. "Get out of the car now. Hands on the steering wheel." He was no longer requesting documents. He had escalated from a traffic stop to detention. Walker slowly raised both hands, placing them on the steering wheel. She offered a slight smirk. Carter's violation was complete. The evidence collection phase had begun. She knew she was about to endure humiliation, but the price Carter and this police department would pay would be manifold greater than any personal embarrassment. The hot asphalt of Maplewood Drive began to radiate heat, but for Admiral Patricia Walker, her focus created a cold zone all its own. When Officer Carter bellowed the order to exit the vehicle, she complied with calculated slowness. "Out of the car, hands where I can see them," Carter commanded, his voice filled with triumph. Walker stepped out. She did not bow her head, nor did she rush. She wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gabardine suit, making her look like a senior political leader rather than a regular citizen stopped in traffic. I am complying with all requests. I repeat, this is an unlawful detention, Walker stated, directing her voice clearly and deliberately toward Carter's body cam. I am verbally recording every violation. Carter sneered. Of course, lady, all criminals say that. That was the final insult Walker permitted him to utter before triggering her response. Carter began a rough pat-down search, patting her hips and shoulders with unnecessary carelessness. Meanwhile, Walker activated the observation posture she had learned during her naval intelligence training at Fort Lewis. This was a psychological state. That allowed her to separate emotion from data. She was not Patricia Walker, the humiliated citizen. She was the tactical brain noting the time. 800 am, a 5-minute detention without ID verification, noting the location. 4 unnecessary touches to the waist and shoulder, violating standard search protocol, noting the badge number. She meticulously recorded James Carter's badge, number 66621, and Ethan Brooks's badge, 8743. In analyzing the body language, Carter's breathing was shallow and rapid, his pupils slightly dilated, leading to the conclusion, high deception. Stress level. He knew he was doing something wrong. I am done with the search, Carter said, slightly out of breath. No weapon. Hands behind your back. Brooks stood there, confusion evident on his face. He looked at Walker's expensive suit, her icy composure, and then at Carter's unprovoked aggression. Carter, did we check the plates? Brooks asked, his voice low. Carter glared at his colleague with hatred. Shut up, Brooks. I am in charge here. She fits the criminal profile. I will verify at the station. As Carter was pulling Walker toward the patrol car, Walker's eyes scanned the crowd beginning to gather. She was not looking for pity. She was looking for authorization. And she found it. Standing about 50 meters away next to an olive-drab SUV with military license plates was Army Major Daniel Thompson. Thompson, a Judge Advocate General, JAG course officer, was Walker's military aide and most senior legal advisor. He was in civilian clothes, but his rigid military posture was unmistakable. Walker executed a non-verbal command sign. A slight jerk of the left shoulder, the tactical sign they had agreed upon for high-risk situations. I am illegally detained. Activate Emergency Protocol Alpha. Thompson understood. His eyes were focused and cold. He did not hesitate. He pulled out an encrypted satellite phone from his jacket and began recording video collecting every violation by Carter. A coded encrypted call was placed to the Chief of Naval Operations Center CNO Ops Center, reporting Admiral Walker is being unlawfully detained by a local police officer. Request Naval Criminal Investigative Service NCRIS immediate intervention and contact with the Department of Defense, Inspector General DOD IG Office. This action activated sovereign immunity, elevating the incident to a national security level far beyond the jurisdiction of the local police department. Carter, unaware that the fate of his career was being sealed through an encrypted call, had reached the peak of his abusive power. He pulled Walker's arms behind her back, violation 2 handcuffs. The metallic click shut of the handcuffs echoed in the morning air, a heavy, jarring sound. As if the gavel of the court-martial had just come down, Walker felt the pain as the handcuffs tightened, but her mind remained completely detached. She looked directly into Carter's body, cam lens speaking every word with the precision of a military oath. Officer James Carter badge 6621, you have just handcuffed a senior commanding officer of the United States Armed Forces. This act constitutes a violation of Article 88 Uniform Code of Military Justice UCMJ, contempt toward officials. It also violates 18 U.S.C. paragraph 242 deprivation of civil rights under color of law. This is a federal-level felony, and I have recorded every detail for prosecution. James Carter was stunned not because she knew the law, but because she cited military UCMJ and federal U.S. Code statutes simultaneously in a tone that was completely non-negotiable. How do you know that? Carter stammered, his arrogance replaced by veiled panic. I know it because I taught that law for 20 years, Walker replied simply. Carter ordered Ethan Brooks. Search the car. Hurry up! Brooks, with a pale face and sweating profusely, reluctantly began the search. He had heard Walker cite the UCMJ. He knew everything was spiraling out of the local police department's control. When Brooks opened the car door, he found the military satchel Walker had originally tried to retrieve. Inside was the Department of Defense Common Access Card, DoD CAC rank of Vice Admiral 08, and vehicle registration issued through Naval Asset Management, proving the armored Audi was property owned or managed by the federal government. Carter Brooks called out, his voice shaking. This is real." Carter, still standing next to Walker, ignored him. "Fake. Anyone can fake papers. Check the trunk." Brooks reluctantly followed the order. He pressed the trunk release button and froze. The image was irrefutable evidence. Inside, not suitcases or gym bags, but a navy dress blue uniform meticulously hung in a garment bag, bearing a large Department of Defense seal on the jacket. Shoulder boards were 3 glittering silver stars, the rank of Vice Admiral. Next to it was a neatly placed cover hat with the flag officer insignia. Carter stepped over and looked into the trunk. His arrogance instantly evaporated like ice hitting acid. No way. Carter mumbled, his voice now a whisper. Walker, still tightly handcuffed, savored this moment of divine justice. She did not need to speak. The uniform spoke for her. Walker's voice was clear and authoritative. "You have just detained a Vice Admiral of the United States Navy who is en route to the Pentagon on charges based on prejudice, and a refusal to verify this vehicle is federal property. That uniform is not a costume. It represents 30 years of service, thousands of flight hours, and the command authority over thousands of sailors." By this time, Major Daniel Thompson had approached closer. His satellite phone still recording, he announced clearly into the encrypted radio command order, confirming illegal arrest of Vice Admiral Walker, U.S. Navy. Jurisdiction is immediately transferred to the Department of Defense Inspector General, and the court-martial request military police MP intervention to secure the scene and the commanding officer. Walker turned to Carter, her voice colder than ice. "I am being unlawfully detained. This is a direct violation by local law enforcement against the senior commanding officer of the United States. Armed forces," she declared, ensuring Ethan Brooks and James Carter in the body cam heard. "I request immediate Judge Advocate General JAG intervention, and I require the Chief of Naval Operations Office to be informed of your misconduct. Game change is complete. This is no longer an unlawful traffic stop. It has officially become a military federal issue that can lead to a Department of Defense general investigation of this entire police department." Carter did not just lose his job. He triggered the collapse of the entire system he served. Walker knew Captain Linda Hayes' internal affairs would arrive shortly, but that was just procedure. The true authority had been transferred to the Pentagon. She only had to wait for the military storm to arrive. The air on Maplewood Drive thickened not from the heat of the asphalt, but from Vice Admiral Walker's recorded declaration. Officer Carter stood motionless, his face sculpted like a statue, his arrogance utterly shattered by the undeniable truth: 3 silver stars in the trunk. The metallic sound of the handcuffs still echoed, but then a new sound cut through the tense silence. Carter's radio crackled with a completely different voice, deep, cold, and possessing absolute authority, not from the regular dispatch, but from a higher-level communication channel. "Unit 6621, this is Captain Linda Hayes. Report immediately on the status of identity verification at the scene." Carter swallowed hard. That was the voice of Captain Hayes, the head of Internal Affairs, known for her uncompromising nature, and only intervening in high-risk cases usually involving constitutional allegations or major security issues. Hayes was the only person Carter genuinely feared, as she represented internal control. Carter stammered, his voice stripped of its bravado. Standard detention suspected organized criminal activity found a costume. I asked, has the identity been verified? Hayes cut across him, her voice sharp as a scalpel. Dispatch reported the vehicle was not stolen before you requested backup. Standard procedure requires identity verification before escalation. Carter, have you violated procedure or not? Hayes's question was not a probe. It was an accusation. She was not asking what was happening. She was asking what had been violated. Hayes had grasped the core information. Even before arriving at the scene within 2 minutes, an unmarked navy blue SUV sped in, parking a few meters from the armored Audi. Captain Hayes stepped out. She was not rushing, but every movement showed professionalism and efficiency honed over years. Hayes had 15 years of experience in internal affairs. She had seen everything, but the scene before her made her pause for a second to process the armored Audi A8, not a normal car, the trunk wide open, 3 Navy stars glittering under the sun, the woman of color handcuffed. Yet with an intimidating cold composure, her eyes seemingly assessing Linda Hayes herself, saw the truth in just 3 seconds. She was not just dealing with an unlawful traffic stop. She was walking into an internal diplomatic crisis between local law enforcement and the federal military. She walked straight towards Patricia Walker, completely ignoring James Carter. Ma'am, Hayes said, maintaining a respectful and professional distance. I am Captain Linda Hayes, Internal Affairs. I apologize for this situation. May I ask your name? Walker looked at Hayes. She recognized the difference in Hayes's eyes. There was no contempt, only extreme gravity and tension. Walker decided to give Hayes a chance to comply with procedure. I am Vice Admiral Patricia Walker, United States Navy. My identification and military ID are in the satchel on the passenger seat. I attempted to present them, but Officer James Carter prevented me and subsequently detained me unlawfully. Hayes nodded slightly. She recognized the name Walker. She had attended a seminar on constitutional standards in law enforcement that Walker had conducted for senior military and police officers a year prior. Officer Ethan Brooks Hayes commanded without taking her eyes off Walker. Please retrieve the satchel from the passenger seat and bring it here. Under no circumstances is Officer Carter to touch it. Brooks, like someone released from suffocation, immediately complied. Carter tried to protest, but Hayes's steely gaze froze him in place. Brooks brought the satchel to Hayes. Hayes asked Walker politely but formally, Admiral, do I have your permission to open your satchel to verify your identity, Captain? You have my full consent, Walker replied. Hayes's action was procedurally flawless, a complete contrast to Carter's carelessness. Hayes opened the wallet and retrieved the Department of Defense Common Access Card, DoD CAC. Even within the military, the CAC card is standard, but the CAC card of a Vice Admiral 08 was an entirely different story. As Hayes looked at the rank and name Walker, Patricia, her expression shifted. Her face maintained professionalism, but her eyes widened slightly. A flash of recognition of the scale of the unfolding disaster. Vice Admiral Walker was not just a senior commanding officer, she was a federal strategic asset. Officer Carter Hayes said, her voice turning cold and uncompromising. Your actions have exceeded your authority and violated federal regulations. Remove the handcuffs immediately. Carter attempted to argue, his voice trembling. Remove the handcuffs now, officer. That is my direct order. Hayes's command rang out, cutting through Carter's words. The authority of internal affairs combined with the weight of the DoD CAC card overpowered any remaining stubbornness in Carter. Brooks rushed to Walker, using the key to unlock the handcuffs. I am so sorry, Admiral Brooks mumbled, not daring to look Walker in the eye. Walker rubbed her wrist lightly. The release was only physical. She was still in tactical mode. Hayes turned to Walker, completely ignoring Carter, who stood rigid with anger and fear. "Admiral Walker, my deepest apologies. I will escort you to the station. This matter is outside the jurisdiction of the Patrol Division, King County Police Department." To the station, Walker asked, her voice still low and devoid of emotion. "I will only go to the station under one condition." Hayes took a deep breath, knowing the condition would be a command, not a request. "Ma'am, what condition? I require an immediate phone call right here before we leave the scene. The call must be made over a secure channel and recorded by your body cam. I need to notify the Chief of Naval Operations Command of this mission disruption." Hayes, fully aware that this would officially place the police department under federal scrutiny, had no choice but to comply. Of course. Admiral Walker took the encrypted satellite phone from Major Daniel Thompson, who had now approached. She dialed, her voice shifting into military operational language, precise and concise. "Naval Operations Command, this is VADM Walker, call sign Neptune Sierra Sis. I'm experiencing a mission disruption on Maplewood Drive by local law enforcement. I have been unlawfully detained and subjected to a severe civil rights violation." She paused, listening to the response from the other end. "Likely the Chief of Naval Operations Officer. Affirmative. The incident has escalated from an unlawful traffic stop to a security lapse and a direct violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Request activate Department of Defense, Inspector General DOD IG, and a joint JAG task force immediately. I will proceed to this local police department to provide a witness statement and evidence. Major Daniel Thompson is requested to bring the complete white paper and supreme disciplinary records to the police station. Within 30 minutes, mission transfer jurisdiction to the federal military." Walker ended the call. Her voice never rose once during the entire process, but her authority permeated the entire scene. Carter heard it all. Naval Operations Command, Department of Defense Inspector General, Joint JAG Task Force. Carter's face shifted from arrogance to sheer panic. He did not just realize he had detained a vice admiral. He had inadvertently pulled the thread on an interagency investigation that would ruin not just his individual career, but the police department's funding and military cooperation. Carter's moral collapse was complete. He stood there, his body rigid with fear, realizing he had gravely violated the very law he was paid to uphold his entire life. He had treated one of the military's most senior commanding officers like a criminal merely because of her skin color in her car. Hayes looked at Carter with a cold, unforgiving gaze. She knew Carter had dug his own grave, and now she was responsible for ensuring that the principle of accountability was served. "Officer James Carter," Hayes commanded, "you are immediately suspended from duty. Hand over your badge and weapon to Officer Ethan Brooks. You will stand by your vehicle until summoned by Internal Affairs." Walker nodded to Hayes, a rare sign of respect. "Thank you, Captain Hayes. I will accompany you. Please take me to where I can continue building the evidence for this department's systemic failure." She stepped into Hayes's car. The traffic stop was over. The military legal war was just beginning. Captain Hayes's unmarked SUV glided through the King County Police Department gates. No sirens, but carrying an atmosphere of tension heavier than any chase, Vice Admiral Patricia Walker sat in the back in complete silence. She was not a prisoner, but a commanding officer under protection, and her presence created a crisis from within. Linda Hayes did not take Walker to the crime processing area or the standard interrogation rooms. She drove straight to the administrative staff parking lot and escorted Walker through the back door, going directly up to the second floor where the chief's office was located. Chief Michael Reynolds' office was spacious, but the natural light was not enough to dispel the tension. Reynolds, a middle-aged man with a tired face and a uniform that was no longer pristine from the start of his shift, jumped up from his desk as soon as Hayes opened the door. "Admiral Walker, thank you for coming." Reynolds stammered, his voice filled with subservience. "I deeply apologize for this terrible misunderstanding and misconduct by my officer. I assure you the matter will be handled." Walker cut him off politely but decisively. "Chief Reynolds, this is not a misunderstanding. This is a deliberate abuse of power and a direct violation of the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution against a senior military officer. My purpose here is not to receive an apology, but to provide evidence for the Department of Defense investigation." Reynolds paled. He had received a brief call from Hayes, but hearing the phrase Department of Defense directly from a vice admiral's mouth turned confusion into genuine panic. "Of course," Admiral Reynolds said, rushing to offer her a seat in the leather chair opposite his desk. "We are cooperating fully. Officers James Carter and Ethan Brooks are in the waiting room. We will collect their statements immediately." Walker did not sit. She stood creating a psychological dominance. "Good, but I want to clarify the roles. I am not a witness. I am the authorized agent collecting evidence for the Chief of Naval Operations Joint JAG Task Force. I will interrogate the officers according to Navy procedure. I require a camera-equipped interrogation room and the presence of Major Daniel Thompson, my military aide, who will arrive with the records." Reynolds nearly collapsed in relief. Walker wanted to interrogate. That meant the FBI or the Department of Justice would not be arriving immediately. This was an internal military-led battle. "Absolutely. Captain Hayes will take you to Interrogation Room 2. I will have Thompson brought up as soon as he arrives." Interrogation Room 2 was a small, windowless room with a heavy metal table and cold fluorescent lighting. Major Thompson had arrived carrying an encrypted military laptop and a briefcase filled with records. Walker sat opposite Carter. Hayes stood as the observer by the door. James Carter sat rigidly, trying to maintain a tough facade under the supervision of his union representative, who sat beside him. Officer James Carter. Patricia Walker began, her voice frighteningly calm. "I am not here to threaten you, but to understand the underlying reason for your actions. Recount the traffic stop from your perspective starting at 8:14 a.m. Carter began his practiced narrative. He saw a luxury car inappropriate for the area suspected money laundering drug activity and acted on officer instinct. As Carter spoke, Walker was not listening to the words. She was observing the naval intelligence skill she had learned. This skill was for domain analysis, verbal speaking pace, slightly faster than normal, a sign of anxiety, kinesics body language. Carter frequently reached for his collar to loosen it, a sign of tension in the throat area. Psychology, he used the term instinct repeatedly, which was a psychological wall to hide the lack of reasonable evidence. Micro-expressions when he said I acted for public safety. The corner of his eye twitched slightly, an extremely quick expression of contempt and self-satisfaction, a sign he did not believe his own words. "Stop," Walker ordered. When Carter finished, Officer Patricia Walker asked, "Are you aware I served 8 years in naval intelligence, specializing in deception pattern analysis?" Carter immediately stiffened his eyes, widening uncontrollably. Walker called the panic reflex. "Your body language, vocal stress zone, and facial micro-reflexes all indicate you are deliberately concealing the truth. Let us help you remember." Walker nodded to Major Daniel Thompson. Thompson turned the laptop toward Carter, displaying a document the official dispatch log time-stamped and verified by the JAG task force. Officer Carter Thompson said, his voice dry and decisive. "At 8:14:32, you called the station requesting a license plate check on the Audi A8. The dispatch log confirms. At 8:15:19, vehicle check, no warrants, no violations, no match with any criminal records." Thompson pointed to the screen. "After being informed by dispatch that the vehicle was entirely legitimate, you took the following actions. At 8:16:05, you called for backup, requesting 2 units declaring suspected organized criminal activity. At 8:21:44, you handcuffed Admiral Walker." Thompson looked directly at Carter. "Officer Carter, if the vehicle was cleared by dispatch and there was no other reasonable justification, then the fact that Miss Walker is a woman of color driving a luxury car." Then what was the basis for your escalation? Carter was speechless. He turned to the union lawyer, but the lawyer merely shook his head, knowing there was no defense against this ironclad evidence. Carter's action was not a procedural error. It was a deliberate act of ignoring evidence to satisfy prejudice. Walker signaled. Carter and his lawyer were escorted out. Officer Ethan Brooks walked in. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a nightmare. Officer Ethan Brooks Walker began, her voice softening slightly, a tactical adjustment to build trust. I know you are in trouble, but your cooperation now will determine whether you are viewed as part of the problem or part of the solution. Brooks bowed his head. Admiral, I tried to tell him. I saw the military ID. I saw the rank. I suggested checking. We have reviewed the footage. You acted in good conscience to the extent possible, Walker confirmed. Now be honest. Have you ever witnessed Officer James Carter conduct similar traffic stops based on prejudice? Brooks took a deep breath. His choice was between loyalty to Carter or loyalty to his badge. Yes, Admiral. Multiple times he has a pattern of excessive scrutiny towards minorities driving expensive cars or in affluent areas. Once I saw him continue to search an engineer after dispatch had cleared him. Every complaint was dismissed because Carter always found a way to turn off his body cam at the right time. Brooks's testimony was the final nail in Carter's coffin and provided the systemic evidence Walker needed. The side division was complete. Just as Walker finished Brooks's testimony, Chief Michael Reynolds burst into the room, his face ashen. He had received a series of calls he could not refuse. Admiral Walker, I just spoke with the Secretary of the Navy, SEC NAV, and the Department of Defense Inspector General DOD IG Office, Reynolds stammered, clutching his phone tightly. They have been informed that systemic abuse of power has occurred in a sensitive area near a military base. And what did they say? Walker asked, maintaining an unwavering gaze. They have ordered a full interagency investigation under the direct supervision of the Department of Defense. Reynolds declared, barely breathing. A joint JAG task force will take over all evidence immediately. This is no longer a local police matter. The supreme intervention had officially occurred. The Department of Defense was not just protecting a vice admiral, they were protecting the integrity of the military system from local corruption. Walker finally stood up. She did not need to say more. The federal government, under the command of the Department of Defense, had taken over. Chief Reynolds Walker said, her voice returning to her official demeanor. I need you to prepare the following records for transfer to Major Daniel Thompson within 2 hours. Comprehensive personnel file of Officer James Carter, including all evaluations, disciplines, and the entire 14 previously dismissed civil complaints, along with the reasons for dismissal. Bodycam and dashboard footage. All footage of Carter and Brooks from the past 12 months in traffic. Stops involving minorities. Internal dispatch log. All audio and text transcripts related to Carter's previous complaints. And the court-martial order. Major Thompson. Major Daniel Thompson has received an order from the Special Court-Martial authorizing the seizure of Officer James Carter's personal phone log for the past 6 months. We need to look for external links. Reynolds nodded hopelessly. Everything will be handed over, Admiral. Everything. Walker knew that the collection of the personal phone log was the fatal blow. This was not about fleeting prejudice. This was about finding systemic corruption links who instructed Carter or who paid him to commit this abusive power. Walker looked at Ethan Brooks. Officer Brooks, your testimony is the first step toward restoring trust. Continue to cooperate with Captain Hayes. She turned to Hayes. Captain, you need a reliable officer to supervise the evidence collection. I trust you. Hayes nodded, her eyes showing determination. She had chosen her side. Walker and Thompson left the police department not as a freed citizen, but as an admiral on a mission with enhanced authority. The confrontation was over. The prosecution phase awaited at the Pentagon. The Maplewood Drive incident was officially classified as a Department of Defense (DoD) strategic security and integrity issue. Due to the sensitive nature involving senior personnel and the potential for corruption in the national defense supply chain, the emergency hearing was not held in any ordinary courtroom, but in the Joint Chiefs of Staff briefing room at the Pentagon, the nerve center of the U.S. military. The briefing room was designed to impose authority and eliminate all distracting elements. There were no windows, only harsh light illuminating the large U-shaped conference table made of black marble from the ceiling, creating an atmosphere of cold, impassive seriousness. Every detail in the room evoked the absolute power of the federal military. On the walls, embossed bronze banners bore the names of senior officers who had served on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, creating a sense of historical weight and unshakable responsibility. The hearing panel was an assembly of supreme authority, each member carrying the weight of a federal agency, each having read the emergency summary. The chairman of the Judge Advocate General's Corps. A four-star Army general presiding over the hearing, was the authority with the power to order a general investigation and overhaul of any organization related to military interests. He represented the supreme legal authority of the joint forces, and his gaze showed deep displeasure. He wore a general's uniform, with high-ranking decorations on his chest, adding to the sense of solemnity. His composure was a sign that the severity level was beyond all expectation. The Department of Defense Inspector General (DoD) IG represented the Oversight and Anti-Corruption Agency, focusing on the incident's connection to defense contracts and federal fraud. His presence underscored that the focus had shifted from police abuse of power to national corruption. He was the one who would lead the investigation into Thomas Bennett, General Counsel to the Secretary of the Navy (SEC). The General Counsel directly represented the Navy's supreme authority, ensuring that the humiliation of Admiral Walker was viewed as an attack on the entire Navy chain of command. He sat taking detailed notes displaying cold professionalism, ready to initiate necessary legal actions facing the panel and Chief Michael Reynolds. And the King County Police Department legal team sat trembling, realizing they could not rely on local government protection. Reynolds, who had not slept for the past 24 hours, constantly wiped the sweat from his forehead, trying to maintain composure. Officer James Carter, in a uniform stripped of its badges and a face ashen with fear, sat next to the empty chair where his union lawyer had left. He realized that this was not a place to lie or rely on colleague protection. This was the Pentagon. Carter was a local officer, and now he was facing the entire military power structure. The thick security door opened. Vice Admiral Patricia Walker walked in. A mandatory ritual was performed. The entire panel, including the four-star general, stood up showing absolute deference to her rank and office. Walker wore the navy dress blue uniform, the formal dark blue uniform with 3 glittering silver stars and service ribbons neatly affixed. The dress uniform was not just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of untakeable discipline, a declaration that her 30-year career was built on absolute loyalty to the law and the Constitution. Walker carried no documents, but Major Daniel Thompson placed a sealed briefcase containing evidence on the presentation table. Walker walked to the podium, standing ramrod straight. She was not the accuser. She was the embodiment of violated authority demanding justice. The JAG chairman nodded. Admiral Walker, please begin your presentation on the constitutional and military law violations. Walker placed both hands on the podium, her composure a complete contradiction to the chaos she was about to present. Her voice was low, resonating through the room. Generals, you are not here because of an unlawful traffic stop. Walker began. You are here because of a direct threat to the safety of Department of Defense personnel and the integrity of the Uniform Code of Military Justice (UCMJ). She summarized her career, emphasizing her expertise. I swore an oath to defend the Constitution. My experience includes FA-18 pilot strategic intelligence expert and chair of the Navy Disciplinary Committee. I have sufficient experience to be not just a witness, but an expert analyst of Officer James Carter's criminal behavior. She looked directly at Carter. His behavior was not a personal error. It was misconduct under color of authority, a crime clearly defined in both civil law and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Walker signaled Major Thompson, who projected evidence Officer Carter body cam video onto the large screen behind the panel. Evidence body cam video, the entire 11 minutes of abuse of power recorded by Officer Carter himself. The video started playing. The panel witnessed the entire incident. Walker narrated the details, focusing on the escalation and authority. Minute 003:45, Carter prevented Walker from retrieving her ID, a violation of basic procedure fueled by racial prejudice, masked as officer instinct. Minute 007:02. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoed. Walker pointed to the screen. At this point, I was unlawfully detained. Minute 10. The trunk opened, revealing Admiral Walker's 3 silver stars. The video zoomed in on Carter's face. Walker paused the video, pointing at Carter. You can clearly see Officer Carter's eyes acknowledge my identity. Despite this, he continued to hold me in handcuffs. Calling the U.S. Navy uniform a costume, Walker emphasized that this action escalated from a constitutional violation to defiance of federal authority. He challenged not just me, but the authority of the Commander-in-Chief. This willful act constitutes contempt toward officials Article 92 UCMJ if applied through interagency cooperation mechanisms. The JAG chairman, the 4-star general, lightly tapped his hand on the table, indicating his agreement with Walker's analysis. This incident is not an exception. Walker continued, but a rule protected by the system. Major Daniel Thompson placed a thick folder of records on the table. This was evidence for Carter's personal file and data analysis. Walker explained the methodology. We cross-referenced Carter's vehicle GPS data dispatch logs and citizen information. The results are undeniable. In 9 out of 12 cases, 75% of the time, Carter received confirmation from dispatch that the vehicle and driver were legitimate. Despite this, he intentionally proceeded with detention and search of citizens. Walker turned to Chief Michael Reynolds. Chief Reynolds, your department ignored this pattern 12 consecutive times. This behavior is considered systematic complicity. Your disciplinary system failed to protect citizens. It protected Carter's corruption, repeatedly violating the 4th Amendment. Reynolds mumbled an apology. Walker emphasized that a pattern of 75% of actions violating procedure after receiving a legitimate order from dispatch proves the deep-seated rot in the police department's culture. This is the evidence that this agency requires absolute intervention from the Department of Defense. Walker transitioned to evidence 3, the most shocking revelation. The target of this traffic stop was not the Audi. The target was the public humiliation of an admiral who dared to stand against national defense corruption. She detailed the connection, a suspicious financial transaction. Carter received a significant payment from an offshore account a few days before the traffic stop. This payment was linked to a subsidiary of Sentinel Defense Logistics, the company I signed an order to strip a $360 million contract from due to fraud. Encrypted conspiracy phone logs show 27 encrypted calls between Carter and Richard Doyle, former CEO of Sentinel. The final call was 2 hours before I was stopped. This is irrefutable evidence of conspiracy. And personal retaliation intent. Walker concluded Officer Carter was hired by Richard Doyle to publicly humiliate a senior officer of the United States Navy in retaliation for my anti-corruption decision. This behavior constitutes not only a civil crime, but a direct threat to the functioning of the Department of Defense and national security. Carter collapsed onto the table, trembling uncontrollably. The silence in the Joint Chiefs of Staff briefing room was not the silence of consensus, but the cold silence of strategic judgment. After Vice Admiral Walker concluded her presentation of evidence, the third revealing the link of organized corruption between Officer Carter and defense contractor Richard Doyle, there was no room for defense. The chairman of the Judge Advocate General's Corps, JAG Corps, a white man over 60 in a 4-star uniform with an authoritative stance and a cold, commanding face, slowly placed his pen down. He looked directly at Chief Reynolds, his gaze not angry, but calculating the system-wide damage coldly. Chief Reynolds, the general, spoke, his voice carrying the weight of the entire federal military. The court-martial panel has reviewed these 3 pieces of evidence. We find that your King County Police Department has not only failed to enforce discipline, but has actively participated in intimidating a senior military commanding officer for anti-corruption actions. This behavior is not a local error. It is the intervention of organized crime into the operations of the Department of Defense. This behavior will be punished with the full weight of federal authority. He took a deep breath. We cannot allow the power of a police badge to be abused for retaliation against businesses that commit national defense contract fraud. This incident is a stain on the integrity of both agencies. The general turned to the panel. The DoD Inspector General, a white man aged 55-60, tall, in a black suit with a stern expression and an analytical gaze, nodded. The SEC-CNA General Counsel, a middle-aged white man with a slim build, sharp eyes, and an intelligent and reserved demeanor, was ready. He declared, his voice echoing throughout the briefing room, issuing the irreversible verdict and unprecedented military oversight order on a civilian law enforcement agency. By the authority vested in the Department of Defense and in cooperation with the Department of Justice, we hereby order crime classification. Carter's actions protected by the King County Police Department system are classified as misconduct under color of authority with aggravating circumstances related to conspiracy and defiance of federal authority. High-level special oversight. The King County Police Department is placed under the special oversight of a joint JAG task force oversight for 5 years, effective immediately. This is a comprehensive, unprecedented institutional overhaul for a civilian law enforcement agency. The general further specified the scope of the oversight order, emphasizing the transfer of authority. This task force will be commanded by a Judge Advocate General JAG Colonel who will report directly to the DoD IG office. The JAG Colonel will have full authority to audit every operation of the King County Police Department. The scope of oversight includes recruitment process, rebuild, re-evaluation of all rejected applicants, and psychological screening processes to eliminate officers with systemic prejudice. Training program overhaul, replacement of the current training program with a Navy-developed constitutional law and military discipline program focusing on de-escalation and Fourth Amendment compliance. Financial and contract audit investigation of all recent procurement contracts to find other financial links to Richard Doyle or other corrupt organizations. Establishment of accountability mechanisms, implementation of an immediate supervisory accountability system, ensuring that any officer who witnesses misconduct and fails to report, it will receive equivalent disciplinary action. The goal of this intervention is a total institutional rebuild according to military discipline standards and federal constitutional law, transforming the King County Police Department into a new model of compliance. Any attempt to obstruct will be viewed as contempt of military order and will be prosecuted under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Chief Michael Reynolds, a Latino man, middle-aged with light brown skin, a stocky build, and a tired face with tense eyes, could no longer find the strength to protest. No longer had the strength to protest, the JAG chairman turned to Officer James Carter, a white man, 35-40, tall and muscular, with short cropped hair, a cold face and arrogant eyes, who was hunched over. "Officer Carter, you used your badge to commit an act of betrayal against public trust and the integrity of the Department of Defense. Your action is an indelible stain." He announced the individual penalties decisive and without any negotiation. Officer Carter was terminated without benefits and permanently stripped of his badge for misconduct under color of authority. He will be immediately handed over to the Federal Prosecutor's Office for criminal prosecution for conspiracy defiance of federal authority and violation of civil rights. USC Part 2, 242. Furthermore, due to the military nature of the target, the court-martial will prosecute Carter under Article 92, failure to obey a lawful order, and Article 134, disorderly conduct, of the UCM-JAN unprecedented double penalty, ensuring he faces maximum accountability under both civil and military law. Richard Doyle, a white man, about 50, a businessman with graying hair, in an expensive suit, with an ambitious and cold expression, and Sentinel Defense Logistics files, were transferred to the FBI and the DoD IG office for investigation into corruption and conspiracy to intimidate a federal officer. Officer Ethan Brooks, a white man younger than Carter, with an average build, light brown hair, a kind face, and an anxious but honest gaze, was retained with full support for his truthful cooperation. He will become a key witness in the criminal prosecutions and will be protected by the JAG task force. The JAG Corps chairman turned to Admiral Patricia Walker, his eyes deeply respectful. "Admiral Walker, your report has triggered a profound necessary reform. Your strategic patience turned a personal humiliation into a systemic victory. The court-martial panel trusts you will continue to oversee this transition." He struck the official gavel hard onto the table, a resounding and final sound ending all debate. "The order has been issued. The hearing is adjourned." Walker, in her navy dress blue uniform, said no more. She nodded to the panel, turned her back, and walked out. She did not need to look back at Carter. Victory was not revenge, but the re-establishment of order. She succeeded in turning a personal humiliation into a national reform. 6 months after the verdict at the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs of Staff briefing room was no longer where Admiral Walker conducted her investigation. She now stood at the podium of the newly established National Military Civilian Leadership Academy, an institution funded by the Department of Defense itself and placed under the oversight of the Joint JAG Task Force oversight. The academy was built on the foundation of constitutional accountability principles and designed to retrain every rank of local law enforcement and military personnel involved with federal bases. The academy's large auditorium did not contain hardened old police officers, but hundreds of new recruits and mid-level officers representing a new generation. They listened intently, notebooks resting on their laps. Vice Admiral Patricia Walker was no longer wearing the formal navy dress blue uniform. She wore a navy blue working uniform, her 3 silver stars still gleaming, but it was a symbol of discipline and education, not judicial power. Her traffic stop had become the first mandatory case study in the curriculum. "You are not here to learn about traffic law." Walker began, her voice low and clear. "You are here to understand the calculus of power. When the power of the badge meets ignorance and bias, the result is systemic loss." The screen behind Walker displayed the famous body cam footage, the moment Officer James Carter handcuffed her. But instead of dwelling on the humiliation, the footage was used to analyze the procedural failure points, the failure to verify ID, the escalation, and the deliberate disregard for dispatch data. Standing next to Walker, where civilian assistants would usually be, was a police officer with a new badge. It was Police Major Linda Hayes, a white woman 45, with short brown hair, tall and composed firm eyes, and a disciplined aura. She had been promoted from Internal Affairs Captain due to her actions 6 months prior. Major Hayes now headed the Joint Military-Civilian Accountability Division, a new agency directly under the JAG task force. This agency was established to maintain continuous oversight, based not only on complaints, but also on predictive data analysis of misconduct patterns. Major Hayes is the textbook example of choice, Walker explained. She could have chosen loyalty to a colleague, Officer Carter, or loyalty to the constitutional law in her badge. She chose the latter. Hayes's rapid promotion was a clear message: honesty and constitutional compliance were the path to advancement in the new system, not cover-ups. She had provided evidence against her colleague, accepted immense professional risk, and now she was the chief architect of change. Walker moved to the core of the lecture systemic evidence of the reform's effectiveness. She provided not just promises, but concrete numbers audited by the DoD. Walker presented the audited figures. In the 6 months of the JAG task force's operation, the number of civil complaints had decreased by 55% compared to the same period the previous year. The number of unlawful detentions had decreased by 62%. Cooperation between the King County Police Department and the Naval Station had increased by 80%, significantly improving area security and showing that trust could be rebuilt, but only with external intervention and resolute oversight. These figures are the receipts, Walker emphasized. The significant reduction in violations and the increased cooperation with the Naval Station demonstrate that trust can be rebuilt, but only with external intervention and resolute oversight. The King County Police Department is now the national pilot model for other police departments under DODIG investigation. The success of the financial audit and anti-corruption efforts was also mentioned. Contract terminations with corruptly linked contractors had saved the national defense budget tens of millions of dollars, indirectly proving that the traffic stop was a small operating cost to expose a larger criminal network. Walker projected the final 2 photos onto the screen, creating a sharp contrast in career choices. Officer James Carter photographed at federal court with handcuffs and a haggard face. Carter's fate terminated without benefits and convicted of federal civil rights violation and failure to obey a lawful order, Article 92 UCMJ. He is currently serving his sentence. The prosecution of Richard Doyle is also underway based on the evidence Carter inadvertently provided. Officer Ethan Brooks, a white man younger than Carter with an average build, light brown hair, a kind face, and an anxious but honest gaze, who cooperated truthfully, now stood in a classroom teaching about authority ethics and de-escalation. Brooks's role he was retained, demonstrating that an officer can acknowledge the system's flaws and become part of the solution. He is the new training officer who will teach recruits how to wear the badge with honor. This contrast was the most powerful lesson. Walker did not seek to destroy. She sought to reuse and rebuild. She removed the rot and gave opportunity to those with conscience. Walker stepped to the front of the podium, her gaze sweeping across every new recruit. This incident started with a moment of racial bias and abusive power against me, a Navy admiral, but the outcome is not about Patricia Walker. The outcome is about constitutional principle. She concluded with a resonant call to action. The badge you are about to wear does not grant you the right to act without question. It grants you a responsibility, the highest responsibility, to serve the people, not your prejudice. The power of the badge is only responsibility. An officer's true strength lies in loyalty to the Constitution, not to a colleague, not to the chief, but to the document that established this nation. I witnessed justice triumph not with guns, but with the precision of data and the persistence of honesty. My personal incident became the catalyst for national reform. Walker looked directly into the recording camera. Justice was served flawlessly. If you believe in this reform and accountability, share the story, because we have proven that justice does not only wear a judge's robe. Sometimes justice wears a navy dress blue uniform and carries analytical data.